Ed Davey, Sir Ed Davey, thanks for talking to us here. We're sat in front of the this VW camper van here, which is probably one of the tamer things or places you've done an interview in recent days. I saw you on the teacups yesterday. I also saw yesterday that there was a journalist had written, in true Ed Davey style, Ed Davey has done this kind of crazy thing. And I thought, wow, it's amazing that they could write that, and actually it needs no explanation, that this style of campaigning you've concocted is sort of cutting through. So just wanted to kind of talk us through what the thinking behind it is, because it is quite unusual.
You may say that, but if you remember, throughout this Parliament that's just gone, we've done a lot of ways to get over our message. So when we, for example, won our first of our many by-election victories in Cheshire and Amersham, I took a hammer and hammered down a blue wall to signify the fact that the Liberal Democrats were back. We were going to take on the Tories in the south of England, in traditional Tory heartlands. And we sort of played on that theme a bit. You remember bursting the bubble, showing Boris the door, the tractor and so on. So people perhaps shouldn't be surprised that what we're trying to do is get over some serious political messages, but in a way that I hope is engaging and shows that, you know, I don't always take myself too seriously, even if I take our policies and values very seriously.
Is there a danger of that, of maybe almost being seen to demean the general election campaign, because it is so important and the issues are so important, and by campaigning in a way which, you know, a lot of people have described as doing stunts day after day, then in some way it lessens the kind of gravity of the campaign?
That's not what we're finding on the doorsteps. I mean, the judges of this are the voters, right? The ordinary people. And when you go and talk to people, they're actually engaged more. And, you know, I was going around Thorpe Park yesterday, avoided the roller coaster and all these other rides they made me do. And young people coming up to me and were excited about what we were doing, but also about our message.
Are you meeting many voters, though? I mean, is there not a criticism to say that you're sort of going into these places, doing these funny things, but actually, where's the street politics or the street campaigning?
Well, actually, at Thorpe Park, I was meeting these young voters, one of them actually from this constituency, and she's going to vote for Sarah Dyke, I'm delighted to say. And
well,
she'd
you
heard
probably wouldn't be bringing it up if she didn't.
She was actually had heard what we said about mental health. And that's massively important for young people and for children. There's got very long waiting lists. And they were really pleased that one party was talking about it and talking about it in an engaging way. And would I like to do more canvassing? Yes, I would. I actually love canvassing. My team knew how to pull me away from the doors because I love just engaging with people about the issues that concerns them. And what I've been trying to do as Lib Dem leader, both in this campaign and before, is make sure that we are listening to people. Because you'll have picked this up, Lewis, in all your interviews and your discussions with people. You've seen it in the polls. People are pretty disillusioned in politics. They're pretty turned off. And that should worry us all. We want people to come out and vote. We want people to get engaged. We want to get them to be heard. And we need to do that. And to take another example, I've talked about being the voice of carers. Because there's a group of people, millions of people, who are often been forgotten and ignored. So we're trying in our approach, with our policies, whether we conduct ourselves, to show we are really engaging.
Of course, this is all about a very serious thing, which is the election itself. And there are some pretty serious and very interesting outcomes that are potentially possible. I mean, you'll have seen the MRP polls like everybody else. Some of those polls actually show the Lib Dems as the second biggest party in Parliament, nip and tuck with the Tories, but nonetheless. So that would mean that you would be leader of the opposition. I mean, is that something that you think is possible, becoming the second biggest party in this election?
When I look at polls, sometimes they're not as good for us as I'd like them to be, and sometimes they're way better than I think could be the case. So I hope you don't mind, but I don't take polls quite as seriously as some people do. What I take seriously, two things. First of all, real elections. And this Parliament, I've been delighted that we won 4 by-elections in Tory heartlands. I think that's a sign of the times with long-term Tory voters switching to the Liberal Democrats. And of course our amazing council elections, where actually at this May's council elections we did push the Tories into third place. You're absolutely right about that. The second thing I look at is our canvass data. We do knock on a lot of doors, we talk to people, have lots of conversations with people on the doorsteps, listening to them and putting forward our local candidates to be local champions for the area, our policies, both local and national. And I have to say the canvassing is going really well.
But so this is what I'm trying to get at, which is that, do you think it is possible possible, obviously not a single vote has been cast yet, but it is possible that you could overtake the Tories to be the second biggest party. I mean, surely that's what you want, right? You would love that.
Lewis, I'm genuinely not focused on that, and it may surprise
Really?
you. But let me tell you what I'm focused on, and I'm not sure if I said this on the programme before, so you'll get a scoop.
That's what we like to hear.
When I
That's just
became
the ice cream.
when I became the leader back in 2019, we'd had three really bad elections on the trot. We'd fallen behind the SNP in terms of MPs, and we become the fourth party, which restricted the number of times we could ask questions in Parliament, a whole range of things like getting on the media. And it's been really frustrating being a UK-wide party. And one of the targets I set for the party at this election was to get more MPs than the SNP. And that means we need to win a lot of seats, mainly against the Tories, a few against the SNP. And if we do that, we could really be very, very influential in the next Parliament. Plus, I think we would undermine the dangerous nationalism of the SNP, which would break up our wonderful United Kingdom.
But would you like to be the leader of the opposition?
Listen, one thing I'm not going to do is be distracted by things that may never happen. I'm going to focus.
But you must. I mean, it'd be quite good, wouldn't it?
I'm going to focus. You're very tempting me. I can see that, Lewis. You naughty boy. I am going to focus. I'm going to focus on the job in hand, and that is to get over Liberal Democrat policies, health and care at the centre of our manifesto, our campaigns on costs of living, our campaigns on sewage and the sewage scandal, and I'm going to do that around the country.
I'm just trying to think of the politics of the next Parliament, though, because if it is true that Labour have a big majority, and it could be a really, really big majority, obviously the opposition in Parliament's got to come from somewhere. If everything goes according to plan, you could have scores of seats, and you will be a big part of that. So I'm just trying to understand how you would play it, whether you're the leader of the opposition or not, in terms of opposing a Labour government. So, for example, I mean, you know that the Labour Party want to liberalise planning reform. Is that something instinctively you'd support?
Well, let me ask you the general question, then come to the Pacific. It's really quite easy to know how Liberal Democrat MPs are going to behave in the next Parliament. We've just published a manifesto. You look at that, it got policies that we focus on, ones on health. But
you won't be able to implement that manifesto because you'll be in opposition, so it's not really a good guide.
That's a bit of an issue which I want to challenge. If you have local champions like Sarah Dyke here in Glastonbury and Somerton, yes, they'll stand up for issues affecting Glastonbury and Somerton and Somerset and the West Country, but they can also be part of a Liberal Democrat parliamentary party that in Parliament campaigns and wins the argument. And I know this may not...
But you can't legislate. You'll be in the opposition. You can't legislate.
Well, two things. First of all, you can legislate.
Well, yeah. Only with the government's agreement.
Well, in the last Parliament, my colleague, Wendy Chamberlain, the Liberal Democrat MP for North East Fife in Scotland, she did an amazing thing. She legislated to give carers, unpaid carers, family carers, a week off from work so they could do their caring responsibilities without any consequences from their employer. Amazing step forward. The Tories had promised it, hadn't done it. It took a Liberal Democrat to legislate for it. Plus, you can influence the government's legislation seriously. First of all, by votes in Parliament. Secondly, by winning the argument.
Okay, but on planning...
that may be very old-fashioned, but you can win the argument. And I believe Liberal Democrats are doing that on care and so many other issues.
And on planning? Would you support... I mean, instinctively, do you think we should liberalise planning laws, as Labour are saying we should?
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing Labour's Party's manifesto and seeing what they say. I'll tell you what we believe in. We believe in community-led planning and community-led housing.
Which means NIMBYism, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. It actually means the reverse of that. Let me take you through it. I'm very happy to take you through it. At the moment, we have a developer-led approach, which means developers end up building the wrong houses in the wrong places. And a community-led approach has been tried in a number of areas and it's worked. It means the communities say, look, we need more affordable houses for our people. We need to make sure they've got the infrastructure, whether it's the schools or the GPs or the water infrastructure. And when you do that, you actually take people with you. One of the reasons why people oppose the developer-led approach of the Conservatives is because it means that they say, well, we can't get a GP at the moment, so why do you want more houses? Our sewage isn't being dealt with properly, so why do you want more houses? If you actually come with a community-led approach which deals with those issues, you can persuade people because they want their children housed, they want their grandchildren housed.
Of course. You've obviously put the NHS at the centre of your campaign. The NHS, like all of the other public services, have, after many, many years of below-average spending settlements, ended up in a poor state, a parlous state. I mean, do you now accept that those early years, when you were in government of this coalition period, that actually austerity was a mistake?
Well, we fought the Conservatives every day.
You also didn't succeed on austerity.
Well, on many things we did. Really interesting on that. But let me just take issue again with you. What happened in 2015? The first budget the Conservatives had by themselves. What did George Osborne do? He cut the welfare budget by 12 billion.
Yeah, but you know as well as I do that there were the severest, the steepest spending reductions took place in the early years of that parliament when you and others Lib Dems were sat around the cabinet table. So it's a very simple question here, Davey. Do you accept that austerity those years was a mistake?
What I'm showing to you is that we fought the Conservatives and we won on so many things. No, well, I'll have to take you through all the things we won on.
I don't want to.
But you don't want to hear about the successes and achievements, do you?
Well, no, I just want to ask you. No, I just want to ask you a specific question about, because people want to know. You were in that cabinet. You were a key member of that government, and they will want to know, particularly if you are going to be as influential as you claim you will in the next parliament, what your general approach to matters around fiscal discipline will be. So do you think, was it a mistake or not? Do you regret it now when you look at the state of the NHS and public services? Was it a mistake?
Well, you ask what people want us to know about us. We published our manifesto with costings, which sets out our fiscal plans.
And many people have questioned those costings, as you know.
Well, I'm happy to answer
we can
those
do
questions.
in a minute, but I just wanted that philosophical question to start.
The manifesto that we published yesterday with the costings, I think, answers that philosophical question. We're saying that some of the most successful sectors who are making huge amounts of profits, the oil and gas companies, the social media companies, the big banks, and the wealthiest multimillionaires and billionaires, we're asking them to pay some more money.
Yeah, I understand that.
And I think that's the right thing to do. I think it's morally right, and that it would enable us to fund public services. So I don't think we could be clearer, could we?
Well, you could be clearer on whether you think austerity was a mistake or not, because you haven't answered my question and I've asked it twice.
Well, I believe I have, actually. And let me give you another example to help you.
I don't need any help. I just need to know whether it's yes or no, Ed.
Well,
that would help me enormously.
I managed to attract, and the Liberal Democrats managed to attract, tens of billions of pounds of investment in our country during the period. How did we do that? We managed to ensure that the policies around energy, particularly renewable energy, attracted tens of billions of pounds of investment. And there's a really interesting graph that the Treasury produced at the back end of that government, where it showed investment in transport, in water, in telecommunications, in energy. The only sector that the Liberal Democrats have been in charge of was energy, and that graph showed we'd attracted way more investment than all the other sectors run by the Conservatives have managed to achieve. So actually, under the Liberal Democrats, we saw huge capital investment, lots of money spent in our country, which made us the world leading offshore wind.
But I don't know what that's got to do with austerity.
And Lewis, it was a counter austerity because it produced money, put money into the economy, created jobs, and I'm so proud it made Britain the leader in offshore wind.
I just want to talk about your liberalism. Now, both Labour and the Conservatives, as you know, are committed to banning smoking over time. What's your position going to be on that? You voted for it, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, well, it's very difficult as a Liberal to talk about banning things. And I thought long and hard about this one. And when we discussed it amongst the Liberal Democrat MPs, we decided that we'd make it a free vote. Because as we talked about it, concerned about banning, we ended up in slightly different places. And I think that's reasonable. And other parties had free votes too. Let me tell you why I ultimately ended supporting Rishi Sunak's proposal. I lost my father to cancer when I was 4. I lost my mother to cancer when I was 15. And although neither of them died from cancers related to smoking, it makes you think very hard about cancer. And we've been putting cancer as one of our top priorities in our health package. And I don't think I could have really been taken the party forward on health if we'd not made that difficult decision. And I do understand that there are some people in my party who didn't like that. But I would say to them, sometimes you have to look at the evidence. The evidence is that smoking cigarettes was producing horrible health outcomes. It was dangerous on every level. And so we had to move forward on it.
Ed, where's the consistency in banning smoking, as you voted to do, and liberalising cannabis?
A really good question. Let me take you through my thinking on it. Nicotine in cigarettes is really damaging to health, but nicotine in other forms like vaping isn't. Skunk, which we would ban, is a very dangerous form of cannabis, but there are forms of cannabis which aren't dangerous.
But lots of people would say that cannabis over a long time actually is dangerous. So why are you liberalising one and banning another thing?
Well, you're right that skunk and very, very heavy forms of cannabis are damaging to people's mental health. You're absolutely right about that. That's why we wouldn't legislate to allow those to be legal. But what we're really clear about is, at the moment, if you follow the evidence, if you follow the analysis, if you look at the criminal justice system, there is a real crisis in our communities.
But you accept, you can see why some people might think that was inconsistent.
Yeah, but I hope I've explained why. My approach, my personal approach, is taken by what is dangerous. If something is dangerous, like nicotine in cigarettes or skunk in cannabis, we're not having any of it. I wouldn't have any because it's dangerous to people. But if you look at it from the other lens, that nicotine in vapes, that's okay. In a regulated market on less powerful cannabis can be safe too.
Let me just
that's what the evidence suggests.
Let me talk to you briefly about climate change because it's very important. Back in 2019, you committed to achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2045 rather than 2050, which is more ambitious than the government's target and remains so. And at that time in your manifesto, you pledged to invest 86 billion to achieve that. As far as I can see, in your current manifesto, you're promising to spend 8.4 billion. So that's obviously 10% or less than 10%. And now, so that's why the reduction? Why could you only achieve it with 86 billion 4 years ago, and now you're only pledging 8.5 billion?
Well, several things. I'm really pleased you've asked that question. First of all, the 8.6 billion, I think, in our capital investment programme is each year on average over the Parliament. So you have to sort of multiply it by 5. So it's a bigger number. But more importantly, as I discovered when we were bringing tens of billions of pounds of investment into renewables in our country, if you really think through the policies and get them right, you can attract massive private sector investment. So we are spending more than any of the other parties.
But even if it is every single year, that's a significant reduction by comparison to what you were saying in 2019. I mean, 8.4 billion every year. I mean, that's still what? I mean, over the course of the Parliament, it's not very much money, is it, to achieve even if you did that up until 2045, it's not going to achieve
several points
zero.
First of all, it's more than any other mainstream party is arguing for, so I think you can accept that. It's way more than the Labour Party is arguing for example. And I think that's very significant. I think people who are worried about climate change will know that the Liberal Democrats are making it a bigger priority than any other political party at this election. But more importantly than that, as I've said to you before, we're only going to tackle climate change in this country and around the world if we really get behind the right sort of policies. And I was really proud that through our contracts for difference and the auctions we put into renewable energy, not only did we attract tens of billions of pounds of private sector investment, but we reduced the cost. And this is really important because if you can reduce the cost, you don't have to spend so much money. So you get the clean energy, and it's the cheapest. And one of the things that has been so disappointing about the Conservatives in this area is they're backing the most expensive forms of energy. I think people who've been struggling with energy bills want to know that you're going to get back the cheapest form. And the great thing about renewables, where Liberal Democrats have the best record and the best policies of any political party, we're going for the most popular form of energy that's also the cheapest.
Is it your position on the single market, is that a prelude to something more substantial? I mean, could you imagine, for example, that we might at some point apply to rejoin?
Well, we set out in our manifesto yesterday, I think probably the clearest position of any political party, the most ambitious position. We said, though, in the next Parliament, because this is what this election's about, that we're going to have to spend a lot of time rebuilding that relationship with Europe. The trust has gone. You know, the Conservatives have so damaged our relationship with Europe. It will take some time. The things we can do along the way, we're particularly focused on getting a good trade deal early on to bring down some of the barriers, reduce the costs, reduce prices in our supermarket, get our economy growing again.
But over the longer term, would you like us to rejoin, just personally?
Yeah, let me just take you through the argument. It's really important. I set it out. If we rebuild that relationship and that trust, and we have 4 stages, which I don't know how long it will take. It'll take some time, probably longer than the Parliament. We will be able to get back in the single market. And that's going to be really, really critical. I don't know the timescales. I'm sorry I can't, Lewis, but and there's a reason why I can't.
Of course, but I'm asking a slightly broader question, which is, would you like us to rejoin at some point? And the answer to that could be no. You could just say, actually, things have moved on, so we think there's no prospect of rejoining. But in your heart, politically, would you like to?
I think it's page 112 of our manifesto. I could be wrong. Apologies if I got the page number wrong. But what we've said is, after rebuilding this trust, after rebuilding the relationship, after the trade deals, and eventually, I don't know when, getting back into the single market, our longer-term ambition is to be a member of the EU again. But I just don't know when that's going to be. It's going to be, I regret to say, it's some time off.
So it's definitely not the next Parliament, probably not the Parliament after that. It's going to take a long time.
I don't know. I'm not going to mislead you. And one of the reasons why, there's some people who want to say, yeah, we can go back to things as they were before. That's just would be misleading.
But
people.
You are happy, therefore, to have freedom of movement back. You're content to see freedom of movement back.
Well, as you know, we're really pro-European. What we've said in our manifesto is that we think 18 to 30s, our younger people, should have it. There should be a mobility agreement for them with the EU
before single market accession.
Before that, yeah. Because we think young people should be able to travel, have, study, work across Europe, and by the way, citizens of other European countries, young citizens, can come to our country under such a scheme.
But then you're happy with freedom of movement.
I'm going to take you through the argument because it's quite important people hear the position. So I think that we're saying that in the manifesto. That is a commitment that we do in the next Parliament. The single market, as I've made clear, could be some time off. Don't know when. But when we did that, what would be really interesting, and again, this hasn't come out in some of the discussions. Do you know what's happened to immigration since we left the EU? It's doubled. Indeed. It's doubled. Yes. And I think if we're going to have this debate about freedom of movement in some years hence, I think we do need to see that Conservatives, who said they were going to sort it if you came out of the EU, have been proven very happy with badly wrong.
But in terms of migration, would you like to see it come down in the next Parliament? Do you think it's too high?
Yes. And let me really clear about the measures we take. The Conservatives said there's going to be a cap on it. We've heard that so many times, and they failed miserably. And the reason is because they won't take the tough measures. Here's a tough measure. We should pay our care workers properly. So we're the only party arguing for a higher national minimum wage, especially for care workers, £2 an hour above the national minimum wage, so we get more care workers from our country in our care homes looking after our people, thus helping the NHS. Because the Conservatives won't do that, and they won't put the taxes, reverse their tax cuts on the banks and so on, what they've done is they've issued hundreds of thousands of visas for healthcare workers from other countries. So if you are serious about bringing down immigration, and Liberal Democrats do think it should come down over the life of the next Parliament, you've got to do measures like we're doing. And I have to tell you, we're the only party arguing for that.
Finally, Ed, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Ladbrokes have just opened betting on what you're going to do next. What activities will Ed Davey do before the July the 4th, 2024? And I'll just take you through some. I don't know, it might be giving you ideas, your team ideas. Got ride a bucking bronco, 2-1. You fancy that? Hot air balloon ride 3-1, bungee jump 5-1, jump out of a plane 5-1, fired out of a cannon 6-1, wing walk 10-1, and sparring with Anthony Joshua 12-1. Is Anthony Joshua a Lib Dem? Do we know?
Well, I tell you what, I don't want to move the markets.
Yes, no, we don't want to do any insider trading.
Betting odds and insider trading, but. And I hope Ladbrokes can hear this because then they can't say I'm doing anything dodgy. But I have asked my team to engage with Anthony Joshua's people. No, I'm teasing you, Louis. You took it seriously.
No, I was just about to. Well, you did promise us a scoop. I couldn't find one in the rest of it. So yeah. Well, look, I'm assuming Anthony Joshua's a Lib Dem. He's a fighting man. Are you really?
He's a great British champion.
A great British champion. Ed Davey, thanks for having us.
Thank you very much indeed.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.